I titled today's conversation Mind Map, from the position of the observer. This is also related to Tuesday's conversation, where we spoke about awareness of being. Today I'd like to discuss what I refer to as the position of the observer, and how to remain in this position of the observer, your ideal state of consciousness, from which everything happens automatically, naturally, and ideally for you. I also refer to this as being the light-hearted observer, where we don't interfere with the process and allow the power of the subconscious mind to do everything to bring forth our vision from this position of bliss. Now, while also remaining in this position of the observer, inspiration to realize your vision seems to increase. This is creative imagination, which we'll discuss in a moment, where inspiration from infinite intelligence flashes upon the mind's eye spontaneously, which I believe was always happening, although if one gets caught up in overthinking or inaccurate thinking or beliefs, it could only seem like it's not always happening. Now, one might be operating the power by reimagining what has already appeared, thus forming a personal identity around that imaginal activity, whether it be helpful or not, like we spoke about in Tuesday's video. I'll link in the description to it. We can relate this to synthetic imagination, which we'll talk about in a moment. And imagination is more than one may define it. I experience it as the true reality. If everything that appears was first sourced from imagination, then how could it not be the true reality? For example, my experiences with remote viewing, telepathy, etc. And being an entrepreneur for many years, I've seen ideas mentioned to me in conversation only a week later, see the same idea initiated and brought into fruition somewhere else in the world without physical contact. This is because there's one source, one imagination. And speaking of remote viewing, I put together a video recently sharing a few of my remote viewing, astral projection, and lucid dreaming experiences. If you have not already seen it, I'll link in the description to it. Now, you have the ability to imagine things before they appear. We have all experienced this in our lives, like Neville Goddard once said in his book, Out of This World. He said, "Many persons, myself included, have observed events before they occurred. That is, before they occurred in this world of 3 dimensions. Since one can observe an event before it occurs in the 3 dimensions of space, life on Earth must proceed according to plan. And this plan must exist elsewhere in another dimension and be slowly moving through our space. If the occurring events were not in this world when they were observed, then to be perfectly logical, they must have been out of this world." Now, as one remains in the position of the observer, by releasing control, they notice that they listen to their intuition easily, which inspires them to actualize their ideal state of consciousness into physical forms if applicable. There's no overthinking. They also allow everything to happen automatically as a result of not identifying with the unnecessary controlling beliefs. And they do not judge by appearances, because there's no identification to those beliefs as well. Rather, remain in the feeling of this ideal state of consciousness. And from this ideal state of consciousness, inspirations flash upon the mind's eye for creative expression. And also notable mention, they may also find everything happens automatically and ideally without being aware of the inspirations flashing upon the mind's eye. Yet upon reflection, they realize everything happening ideally upon connecting the dots looking backwards as the journey to realizing that vision. As I always say, you can realize a vision in a flow-based way or a force-based way. It is up to you. You choose your life experience. So, observing events before they occur happens automatically by remaining in the position of the observer. A natural result of releasing identification to beliefs that result in being overly identified with the appearances through the various ways we've discussed in the videos. I'll link in the description to some helpful ones. Now, Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich speaks of creative imagination and synthetic imagination. For synthetic imagination, he says, through this faculty, one may arrange old concepts, ideas, or plans into new combinations. It merely works with the material of experience, education, and observation with which it is fed. So this is imagining based on what a person has stored in their subconscious mind, based on past experiences, education, and observation with which it is fed, as in how they relate to the five sensory stimulus. For creative imagination, he says, through the faculty of creative imagination, the finite mind has direct communication with infinite intelligence. It is the faculty through which hunches and inspirations are received. So this is going beyond that information stored and the imaginings in relation to them. So synthetic imagination is where one looks around this physical world and memories of this physical world and chooses what they would like to experience. For example, in lifestyle, material objects, life experiences, how their relationships are, etc. Creative imagination is where we go within, travel the infinite world of imagination, and bring forth what has never appeared before in our five sensory experiences. This is the realm of the inventor. And by inventor, I'm also speaking of inventive ways of lifestyle, life experiences, and relationships. You can apply this to any area of your life. So we can say synthetic imagination is imagining by choosing to imagine as true for ourselves in relation to desire based on what has appeared. And creative imagination is being open to possibilities, to receive imaginations in relation to desires based on what has not appeared yet. This is a high degree of thinking for yourself. It is going beyond known information and doing things your way, which may be radically different than how others currently appear to do it. Also a notable consideration, it can actually be a combination of the two, synthetic imagination and creative imagination. And they can blend seemingly together as it is one imagination, only conceptually distinguished for discussion. For example, take a peer-to-peer service like Airbnb. They connect renters with those looking to rent for vacation or long-term stays. So before this, there have been those that rented out their space, bed and breakfasts, and there have been people that were interested in these kinds of accommodations. Airbnb bridged the two in a creatively imaginative way that was not done before to this degree. So with synthetic imagination, a person's life can relatively remain constant day to day, and although there are changes in appearances and experiences, they tend to be what they would call gradual rather than radical. With synthetic imagination, they may also change their life experiences as well to be radically different, yet based on what they observe, what others are doing, or the world appears to do, known ways, and confine their imaginal activity to this. The common denominator here between the two is that this is still about preference. You choose what you prefer. So now what I encourage, as I always do, is to think for yourself. Benefit from synthetic imagination and also benefit from creative imagination, which has been more of my area of interest in the last 3 or 4 years, as you may tell on my channel. For example, I brought forth the life that I desire in business, relationships, lifestyle, etc., as a result of looking around as to how others I was inspired did it, and it worked, synthetic imagination. It was still radically different from when I started this journey with Think and Grow Rich in 2004. And at a certain point, I found myself more interested in the radical thinkers, the misfits, and from their application of creative imagination, whether they would call it this or not. They would be able to actualize their visions via creative imagination and live what one could consider unbelievable lives and have what one could consider as unbelievable life experiences. So today I would like to discuss ways of inspiring both synthetic imagination and creative imagination. Both can be helpful depending on the life that you choose. By working exclusively with and through our imagination, this allows us to remain in this ideal state of consciousness and operate, as I mentioned earlier, as the light-hearted observer. Because what we're dealing with here is mental phenomena beyond physical appearances. The mental phenomena appears as physical experiences. So now you can reimagine what appears in your life, regardless of appearances, and it appears accordingly, as within your mind's eye from the position of the unbiased, neutral observer, you are aware of the mental phenomena, the imaginal activity in relation to the five sensory experiences. And you are also aware of the mental phenomena, the imaginal activity of what we can call from out of this world, new ideas from creative imagination. You can apply synthetic imagination by reading books, going to school, having certain experiences, and from there, imagine accordingly as to the kind of life that you want, and you can also expand upon this scope as well. For example, I travel a lot and I connect with a lot of different people, and I love to hear about how a person believes reality to work. I'm not interested in judging. I like to listen with a sympathetic ear. I like to learn about their ways of life, their goals, their dreams, their aspirations, and how they relate to them. I also, when I travel, explore new places and experiences whenever I feel intuitively compelled to do so. I listen exclusively to my intuition and trust it explicitly. As a matter of fact, I won't lift a finger unless I am intuitively inspired. So now from these experiences, I discover many ways of combining these ideas. For example, I've lived in a number of countries and I've stayed in different places in Airbnb, and I've done it for many years. And from what I found from these experiences were all these different things that I prefer about places to stay. So I created a list. And the place that I've been in the last year and a bit has met all of this criteria. It also met the criteria on my list that I did not consciously consider as ideal, yet I know if it is based on how I feel, which is a combination of synthetic and creative imagination. So from the synthetic imagination perspective, having been through a number of places, I formulated a list of what I desire in a place and it appeared. And I also recommend doing this as well if you find it helpful. And you can also find applications for what I'm mentioning here to apply in different areas of your life as well, which is simply to enjoy more life experiences to inspire the preferences. So we can see then that we can broaden synthetic imagination by broadening our experience pool. Also notable to mention that this can also inspire the discovery of creative imagination as we define it. Now let's talk about creative imagination. I access it by feeling, like, isn't it wonderful? Which is what we're going to discuss further in this Sunday's video, which I'll expand upon it further then. So I capture a feeling of already being all that I desire to be now, without visualizing what implies it. Only a feeling of being true now, which can be a feeling that you are already complete now. Have everything already now. Again, suspending judgment as to what it looks like, feeling into that being already so now, and remaining in that feeling. This accesses creative imagination as we then think for ourselves, and also we easily remain in the position of the observer, because this is symbolic of our ideal state of consciousness, from which all that we would consider to be ideal appears automatically to correspond that feeling. So from doing this, two interesting things end up happening. People, environment, information, and experiences show up automatically to mirror that feeling, like it did with the place I stayed by remaining in the ideal state of consciousness, as certain aspects of my place also matched the feeling, even though it wasn't on my physical list, even if I did not visualize what it looked like. Yet when it appeared, I knew, like Steve Jobs mentioned in his commencement speech, don't settle. As with all matters of the heart, you'll know. So with synthetic imagination, we are being inspired as a result of 5 sensory stimuli to support visualization. Creative imagination can be accessed by remaining in the feeling of being ideal now, regardless of physical or mental appearances, and then when it appears, you'll know it matches the feeling. And as mentioned, it can also appear in your mind's eye as inspiration before it appears in physical form. Or mind is experienced as blank, and then upon reflection, it appeared in correspondence to that feeling as physical form. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's go ahead and conclude this with an auto-suggestion to further encourage. You could say, I experience the feeling of perfection now, wherever I appear to be, from which hunches, inspirations, and visions flash upon my mind's eye as invention and life experiences that are ideally accepted as true, to include as part of my life experiences and expressions of already being all that I desire to be now. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk with you soon. Take care.